It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Tim Murphy, CEO of Boomers Parks. Boomers is owned by Cerberus Private Equity and operates 6 family entertainment centers and 2 water parks in California, Florida, and New Jersey. Since becoming CEO in 2020, Tim led Boomers Parks from bankruptcy to profitability within a year amidst a global pandemic. Initially operating at a $10 million loss, he revamped the customer experience, introduced new revenue streams, and that resulted in a 180% revenue increase in 2021 and continued through today. Tim began his 35 plus years at Walt Disney World and has worked with over 150 entertainment, restaurant, and food and beverage brands at more than 10,000 locations in senior roles. He's also a board director at Coney Park and Happy City, part of the Carlyle Group, which operates over 100 family entertainment centers in Latin America. Tim holds a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Central Florida and an MBA in finance from Orlando College. Tim Murphy, welcome into the corner office.
Hey, Brant, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to connect with you again. You're in there loving the summer in Florida these days, right? What's the temperature up to already?
Oh, goodness. I think we're going to be a high of, where are we at right now? Probably in the 90, 91. That's what it is. It probably feels like 105.
Good day to stay inside. Good to stay inside. What part of Florida we find you today, Tim?
Orlando, Florida.
Orlando. All right, great. My favorite home, my previous home, one of my previous homes, and we've got a previous employer in common there with Disney, so we'll get around to that. But what we always like to start is hear a little bit about the early years of our CEOs. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Sure. Well, my dad was an entrepreneur. My mom was an entrepreneur. So there were several businesses growing up in Cape May, New Jersey. Dad had a fence business, welding business, construction business, sold Christmas trees at Christmas time, picnic tables in the summer, had a construction business, sawmill. And then he decided to get into a family entertainment center called the Spirit of 76. It was a small miniature golf course that my grandfather made in the backyard, brought it to the facility, put in an arcade, put in a full restaurant, and that's what my mom ran during the summer. So my early years of starting was at 8, working for them in one of those businesses, but predominantly the family entertainment center business called the Spirit of 76. It was a great experience. Mom and dad were entrepreneurs, sold everything off. Just before we moved to Florida, they got into growing hydroponic cucumbers, lettuce, and tomatoes in greenhouses, sold that off. Then we moved to Florida, and I've been here in Orlando for the most part ever since 1982, opening up Ripcott Center. So.
The entrepreneurial blood runs deep. Now, brothers and sisters growing up, were you the one-man band selling those?
No, I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest of 4. I will say that, and affectionately, my parents said I was a mistake. I came 9 years after my next closest brother, so I have 3 brothers, one that's 15 years older than me, one that's 14, and the other one is 9.
There you go. Well, I share that in common. I'm one of 3 brothers, and my brothers are 7 and 10 years older than me. And I was always told I wasn't a mistake, but I never believed them for a minute. Were your older brothers and sisters, older brothers involved in the business as well? Did mom and dad pull them in?
They were a little bit in the Spirit of 76, the miniature golf arcade, but the 2 brothers, my next closest and the oldest, were involved in my dad's fence business. It was called A. Murphy Fence Business in Cape May, New Jersey. He put up fences from Cape May to Atlantic City. But bottom line is they were in it. My other brother went into the Navy and never really was part of it. So,
Hmm. Got it. Got it. And how old were you when they moved you to Orlando?
16.
Okay.
Came down at 16, and my first job was the opening of Epcot Center at Walt Disney.
Yeah, yeah, we talked about that. That's awesome. So that was very early days, obviously in the Disney park development, because Epcot was number two, right? There was only Magic Kingdom at that point in time.
Right, right, and
Yeah,
only a few hotels because I
right.
also, well, when I got into finance, I was doing the job costing in the Grand Floridian and the Caribbean Beach. So that's really going back a bit. So.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Well, other than the entrepreneurial instinct that mom and dad gave you, what other kind of things do you remember growing up that kind of influenced you and maybe inspired you in those early days?
Yeah, my dad was always in different businesses. He had a 10th grade education. Mom had a high school education. She did all the books for the company, thank goodness. And I saw through the different businesses, my dad was always really friendly with everyone, but he couldn't figure out why he didn't make more money. And that's what I wanted to get into and find out, well, why didn't he make more money? And it obviously comes down to really understanding your books and
Mm,
accounting and how to price things and so forth. And that's what led me into my undergrad in accounting.
wow.
I loved business classes when I was in high school, and I said, all right, I'm going to go into accounting. I first went to a local community school, and then eventually graduated from the one of the larger universities, University of Central Florida. And then I said, I really kind of like this finance stuff too.
Mm,
So I ended up taking and getting a master's degree in finance. So,
wow. Cool. Did older brothers go into get their graduate degrees or undergraduate degrees as well? Or were you the first one in the family to do so?
no. My oldest brother did get his undergrad degree, didn't get a master's, and my next closest brother, 9 years older than me, he ended up getting his undergrad at the United States Naval Academy, went in the
Oh,
Navy, and then
Annapolis.
he got his master's degree while he was in the Navy. So.
Ah, cool, cool, great. Well, what were some of those interests outside of class? Well, it might have been kind of hard at 16 to move from New Jersey to Florida, right?
Well, it
You
was. Yeah,
sophomore, freshman in high school?
sophomore,
Yeah,
end of my sophomore year is when we moved to Orlando. At Kissimmee, actually, is where we
yep,
moved to. So I
right.
finished high school in Kissimmee, Osceola High School. And I would say northern schools are a little more advanced than the schools here in Florida. So there wasn't that many classes I really needed to take to actually graduate 2 years later.
Okay.
So I had it already pretty much under control from New Jersey. And eventually, my senior year, when I was 17, I ended up going to school for half a year, and then the last half was guidance assistant, and went out and worked at Disney, usually a shift or two. So,
Yeah, yeah, cool. And Disney, how many years did you spend there and starting
um,
when you're a teenager?
yeah, 6.5 years. So
Wow,
I
cool.
I first started in foods, got into operations a bit, into cash control, and then eventually kind of going into my background, which was finance. I started to do the resort financial statements for the Contemporary, Polynesian, at the time Disney Inn, now today's Shades of Green, as well as a job costing for the Grand Floridian Caribbean Beach before they came online, and then start to do their financials. I would wrap that with the parks, and then we would send them to Burbank to consolidate with everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah. Now, was that at the time you were getting your degrees or
Yes,
kind of
yes,
intermittent?
yes. I was working, unfortunately, driving from the back of Disney to the University of Central Florida back when it wasn't as expanded roads as they are today. So I sat in a lot of traffic for a couple hours, usually each way.
Yeah, yeah. And you think about those Disney years, they must have been pretty formative for you. Give us some of the key takeaways that you took, from those early years with Disney.
I think a lot of it, doing the resort financial statements. There's a lot of conventions that come into those areas. There's a lot of groups. There's different bookings. There's different reasons for things coming in, and I think if anything I take out of that piece of it was really understanding what's the behavior of the guest and having an answer for it, because that's
Yeah,
what we needed to provide to the head of finance. What happened? Why didn't it get to budget? What were the things that causing it to be off? So it made you really think harder. I mean, some of the other jobs that I had in foods and operations were fun, and cash control were fun, but really when you got into it, you got to know the nuts and bolts when you finally got into the finance department.
yeah, yeah. And those were during the Dick Nunis days, right? Was Dick
Yeah,
CEO?
no, it was right
No.
after Dick. It was Michael Eisner and Frank Wells when they
Okay.
came in.
Got
And
it.
so, if you remember then at that time, it was a lot of explosive growth, new things happening. The MGM studios was being built,
Sure.
and
Sure.
new hotels were starting to come up or pop up, and a lot of growth. So they had so much to do. They were bringing lots and lots of people from outside the company into the company, and I'm going, wow, I think I'm going to have a harder time getting more advanced from where I am, and that's what
Right.
ultimately led me to go to another job. So.
And Justin Green, I think, was he the head of the Disney parks? And I'm trying to
It
remember
sounds
if
like
that's
it. Yeah, I think he
yeah.
was at the time. That's
And
correct.
he was a finance guy too, as I recall. Great. Well, was it tough to leave Disney? I think you left just
Oh
in
yeah,
the late '80s, early '90s.
yeah. It was 1989 by the time
Yeah.
I finally left, and
Yeah.
yeah, it really was. I loved every bit of my experience. I still love Disney to today. I took my wife out there for her 30th wedding anniversary
Oh,
last year, and at the Grand Floridian, and went to Magic Kingdom and Epcot. But yeah, I still love that place. It's if anything, it sets you apart for service that you need to do.
yeah. Yeah.
Ultimately, what do you do for the guest? And
Right.
there you were a cast member, and I try to teach my team what cast member meant. And but just to get them an understanding of, you're going on stage, you're performing basically, and
Yeah.
everyone's a performer. I don't care if you're in foods or you're an actual character or whatever it might be. So
That customer service focus, yeah, I know they ground that into me. I worked for them for about 10 years, but prior to that was Procter and Gamble, and it was kind of interesting because they had the same sort of focus, but in a different fashion, right? Looking at consumer products. And selling a service is a little different than selling a product. So,
right.
a lot of personalities involved there. And yeah, wonderful company, great company to build a foundation on.
I,
But,
I,
but you,
th- I think the only thing that I took from the time frame, if there was any negativity, and I'm not trying to create negativity out of this, was so many silos that you had to work through within Disney.
yeah, yeah,
And that's, you weren't able to accomplish what you were putting together. And so that, coming from that background of my parents, of an entrepreneurial background, well, let's do this, let's try these
right.
things, and it's like, nope, we have to go through all these levels
17 committees
before.
to get approval.
Right,
Yeah.
just to change something simple. So,
Right. Did you find that that experience though really helped build a foundation for eventually what you're doing today? And we'll get to that in a minute, but kind of
sure.
that entrepreneurial drive, because you never really lost that, given where you've ended up today.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously benchmarking that you have to do in any business that you're in. I
Hmm.
mean, eventually, and I know we're not going there yet, but eventually I got in the restaurants, and you start looking at, well, who's the best in this area? And it was great to start with Disney. I emulate it this way. When I was younger, I used to go to a lot of different concerts. My very first concert was Bruce Springsteen. When you finally go to one of those concerts, you go, there's not much better than this concert,
Right.
that's out
Yeah.
there. And you say that the same thing about Disney's experience, and how you take that out and apply it to business, and having that right type of guest service philosophy, of course making a profit, will set you apart. And that's what helps me today, with what we do differently.
Well, let's talk about that restaurant sector. You've got some great D's there. You got Darden, you got Denny's, right? You did some work with Applebee's. What kind of led you to that direction? Prior to obviously going out on your own where you are today.
Well, I mean, I obviously knew, foods from my parents with their miniature golf and arcade for the 6 years I was in Jersey,
Yeah.
working in foods at Disney. But eventually you go, okay, well, what's out around us? Darden was the next closest thing, really. And I got a lot of experience there. I used to do, at the time, Darden had Red Lobster, and of course we're seeing everything in the news about Red Lobster, what's taking place with them. But I used to do the Red Lobster financial statements for North America and Japan until we sold off Japan. And it was very interesting to see how they were growing Red Lobster and Olive Garden. When one was on, the other one was off. When one, so they were like, okay, well, we need other brands to bring in. And that's when
Hmm.
they started with China Coast. And of course, I was there at the time when they shuttered all 56 locations in a day. I was also there when they brought on Bahama Breeze. And so you really got different experiences of that entrepreneurial background. I really liked where that was. The individuals, Blaine Sweat, that created that concept, was flying all over the place, bringing in new items to create Bahama Breeze. But that kind of got me back to a little bit of that entrepreneurial background. So I really enjoyed, that growth when they started to create new things. But got me into it was, I've got this experience in restaurants. I can see opportunities that are here. Let me see what else I can learn
Hmm.
from Darden, and it just blossomed into small chains to large chains of Denny's and Hardee's, of Quincy's, of Poloco, Cocos and Caros, that was owned by Flagstar Restaurants that became Advanica Restaurants, and today it's Denny's Inc. in Spartanburg, South Carolina. But it got me into Applebee's, it got me into Sonny's, and so many different places, and I've just enjoyed, the numbers are the numbers. You know the traditional financial statement, a little different than Disney, of course, but you see the traditional financial statement. It's food cost, it's labor, it's controllables and non-controllables. That is pretty much the financial statement of a restaurant. And if you can understand it inside and out, you know where you can pull levers to make things better. And that was just a great experience once I got into it.
When did you actually transition from more of the finance and reporting into kind of more true operational roles? Because I know that from our past conversation, even though you had finance director and ultimately CFOs, you got pretty involved in operations coming along. Did that kind of come naturally to you?
Yeah, well, it was always that, and I guess it's the entrepreneurial background. I'll even say when I first went to Darden, I kept asking my boss, what else can I do? What else can I work on?
That's a good question to ask listeners. What else can you do? Right.
And so, it got me into analyzing credit card processing and whether we change vendors or how we save on costs. We ended up putting a good $4 million to the bottom line on just some changes we made there. And I worked on that project. Back at the time, there were gift certificates. And if you remember back in the day, they used to have color copiers that could copy just about anything. And so they were copying the gift certificates. So I had to go to the security company making foreign exchange and American Express travelers checks out of Chicago, and we got some better items in there, micro lines and so forth, to really prevent that copying that was taking place. And that helped us quite a bit. But I just kept getting into more areas that would enhance something I could do on behalf of the company. I was always asking for more. So, but it was always an inquisitiveness. Well, what if we did this, or what if we did that? And when you get silos like you were at Disney, you would say, okay, well, that's someone else's area, go somewhere else. They were open. My bosses were like, well, let's get you involved. Let's get you to meet the main CFO for Olive Garden. Let's get you to meet the main CFO for Red Lobster and how we can help in those areas. So that was a lot of fun for me, but I've taken that everywhere I've gone. And so the next opportunity when I was CFO for McGuffey's Restaurants after I left Darden, I moved to Kinston, North Carolina, but I worked in Asheville, 5-hour drive across I-40 almost every week. Wow. And stay in Asheville. But we had 16 units, different brands. But McGuffey's Restaurants was old. McGuffey's Reader was like a menu inside of an old school book, is what it looked like. Huh. And just getting involved in handling different aspects, from the menu to how we change that, or what vendors we use, or how do we market this. And so I always got more and more involved every place I went. Eventually, when I finally got to Applebee's after I went to Denny's, Flagstar Advanica Restaurants and Denny's in Spartanburg, moved back to Orlando, I got with Applebee's, and I said, I'm going to get my real estate license and become a broker because I want to understand the dirt more. How do I buy the dirt better? Good cross marketing, or good cross parking, I should say, retention. What's the population radius, who's growing and where is it growing, where can we find the next location? So I was always just inquisitive. And I sometimes that hurts you because you end up spending lots of time on things, but you really learn a lot. And then I became the main person for Applebee's in terms of construction and hiring the GCs and finding the dirt and negotiating the contracts. I find the money as the CFO, so all these little aspects kept building and building in all those operational activities because, one, we didn't have experts in those areas, and two, no one wanted to do it. So I just said, all right, let's figure this out because we need to figure out how. I was always thinking about how to accelerate growth. How can we go faster with things? And I guess that's always been just, one of those things that I take from my father way back when.
I love that. And that healthy dose of curiosity, that helps a lot. Huh?
Yeah, I agree.
Talk to us a little bit about leadership, maybe some of the leadership challenges that you might have had earlier on, particularly as you kind of transition maybe from some of those more finance roles where you're kind of working more with folks that are preparing reports more into operational roles.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I always had that mentality of coming up through accounting and finance was everything's black and white, and it's not. It's a lot of gray. And you've still got to work around it. And getting people to see things a little differently is the hardest challenge. And I was very adamant, we're going to do it this way we're going to do it. But then as you progress over time, you start saying it doesn't have to be exactly my way, as long as they get the process done. And then you start learning that you can do that through people, that they can really help you with their own ideas and the way they do it, and still come out with a similar answer. And you start getting to the point, even though I would say early on I was more of a micromanager than today, of being a lot more open with folks and letting them do the way they want to do it, and just say, well, that's just the way they go through the process.
Was
But it
that
took
hard
me,
to let go of?
I think it was more hard to let go because of my accounting background. It needs to be precise. It needs to be the debits and credits, my balance.
It's got a balance, right?
And not everyone gets that,
Yeah, sure.
But you start looking at it going, well, is it really a big deal? Does it really matter? Is it material? Is it going to move the number? You start getting that process in your mind of how an audit goes through. And even though I was not an auditor, of course, we've had many, many audits in my career, and it's just understanding what goes through. And now I believe in audits because, frankly, they tell me where shortcomings are and we can fix the things,
Yeah. Well, you made the transition, obviously, now to back to the amusement business. Kind of interesting how your career has cycled through, and it was kind of out of the, restaurant area. I know you did some contract work prior to that, but tell us a little bit about how you kind of came to that conclusion that you, wanted to get personally involved and found that private equity partner to go out and do what you're doing now with Boomers.
Well, I think it's funny how things have come to me, even though I was consulting over a period of time and I had dipped my toes with private equity. And I'll give you a couple examples of that first until I get to where I am today. Originally, when I was with Applebee's, I would work for the former chairman, CEO of Applebee's after he retired, very wealthy individual, Abe Guston Jr. Since passed away, I guess, about maybe 12, 14 years ago now. He died of a stroke. He was like another father to me. But anyway, I had someone approach me from Alliance Development Group, private equity firm, and said, hey, do you think Abe would be willing to take an offer to buy out the Central Florida Applebee's? I said, sure, but would you let me run it for you and I'll give you the plan on how to do it? And they said, sure, yeah, we'll back you with it. And it ended up being an 8.25 multiple of earnings that I presented to Abe Guston. And he ultimately came back and said, I'm working with other private equity and Patriot Capital Chicago that helped me with 75 C stores that I purchased. Maybe you want to talk to them, see if you can do a little better. So I did. Took the same process and project up to them. And they came back to 8.5 multiple of earnings. Eventually, Abe had a couple sons that wanted to keep the business and kind of push me out. So we'll just leave it at that. And eventually, I ended up taking an opportunity with Sonny's Real Quick Barbecue as their CFO. And the owner came to me and said, I'd really like to see if, from your private equity friends that you've got, if someone would be willing to maybe give me a decent offer on this company. But he had a ridiculous number that he wanted to sell Sonny's for. And that just wasn't going to happen, even though we were going to go to 110 million to buy out the Sonny's chain. Again, I'd try to run it. But the bottom line is, didn't materialize. And I guess, knock on wood, I still had a job for another 3 years after making the approach on that. But I got that experience background, and couple other folks reached out to me and said, hey, this is after I've left Sonny's now and I'm doing some consulting. They said, hey, we've got an opportunity with Atlantic Street Capital up in Chicago to run 23 Jimmy John's as COO and CFO. Would you take a look at it? So yeah, I flew back and forth between Orlando and Chicago every week and helped them get this under control once they purchased it from one of the owners. He was one of the first, one of the owners was the CEO of the company, was one of the first 3 individuals working for Jimmy John Lieutenant at Jimmy John's, and you know what Jimmy John's is today. Oh, yeah, and so we took those 23 over, start to turn around, but they kind of bet on the wrong numbers. Again, this is consulting for them now up there as COO and CFO. And I go, there's a lot of great experience with these guys. I'm just going to stay in touch with them over time. So after when I got back in entertainment, after my restaurant career, I ended up running as CEO for Rebounders Trampoline Parks. Through a mutual friend in the restaurant industry, said, hey, you might want to help this guy out. And I ended up running it for him until we could sell it. And then funny thing happened after that was sold. Private equity reached out to me again and said, hey, Tim, you were just CEO for Rebounders. Would you come down to South America and take a look at several parks we would like to purchase? This is the Carlyle Group. Sure. So in Colombia, Peru, and Chile, go down and look at over 100 family entertainment centers and amusement parks in Colombia, Peru, and Chile, and helped them with the acquisition. They said, hey, we just purchased it in September 2019. Would you be on our board? So I've been on their board ever since. And then my current employers, the Cerberus Private Equity, reached out and said, "Hey, would you take a look at what we're looking at?" There were 16 family entertainment centers, water parks, and amusement parks here in the United States. We're about to, do a stalking horse bid, most likely, if this goes through this way, and force them into bankruptcy. But would you, for all intents and purposes, consult for us and take a look at this and see what we should do from your experience? Sure. So I looked at it for 6 months during the pre and post bankruptcy, and then I took over as CEO June 2020 during the pandemic with 8 of those locations that we decided to keep, and the other ones to either close or sell. And that's kind of how I got to where I am today with private equity.
That's awesome. And so 8 operating locations still, or have you added to that?
Yeah. No. Well, we haven't added to it, but we're creating new prototypes to go indoors. All of our family entertainment centers are indoors and outdoors. We have 5 in California, Boomers, 1 in Boca Raton, Florida. I have water parks in Destin, Florida, and 1 in New Jersey outside of Philadelphia. That's a big Kahuna's water parks. But the Boomers is where we're focused on potentially franchising. So I pitched it to our board, and the board said, sure, go for it. So I licensed, because I've done this with many companies before, franchised them. And I went back and licensed our Boomers brand to be franchised in 37 states. We didn't do the registration states because of potential joint employer liability that was going on in California, which we could go into any of those states if we wanted to with the attorney we have. But we've licensed ourselves, and now we're designing indoor family entertainment centers to do one thing: control the weather. That's our biggest problem we have, is weather. 30% in Florida, and now 40% in California, with extreme heat domes they get, atmospheric rivers with all the rain, and of course extreme colds in the wintertime.
Right. Cool. Great. Wow. How exciting. And how many employees today, and how many guests do you serve annually?
I don't actually have, no, I do have a guest number. We're just under 1 million total in all of 8 parks.
Wow.
Depending on, some locations bigger than others, like Boca and Irvine are servicing between 150 and 200,000 people annually.
Cool.
But I have some smaller parks. With regards to our team members, it cycles up during the summer. Water parks get very top heavy with labor, usually 200-300 in each of those water parks. But our family entertainment centers can cycle upwards to about 80-85 during the summer, but then we cycle back down between 40 and 60 during the rest of the year.
Yeah, cool. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, but maybe you can just talk a little bit about how your leadership's evolved over time.
Yeah,
Tim today versus 20 years ago.
Yeah, so as I shared a little earlier, it was more about black and white, and it's a little more gray. But one of the things that I did when I took over this park, and I was consulting for Cerberus prior to taking over as a consultant for them with all the parks, I went through all 16 parks Apex Parks Group had, and I noticed something missing. I noticed they were all doing something different. There was a lack of honesty, integrity, maybe transparency. And then you start looking at, well, what aren't they doing? There's some fundamental things. Not many were motivated. They weren't really focused on the job. They weren't really excited about what they're doing. And I said, when we take over, we're going to put in what Tim's beliefs are. A lot of that coming from Disney and other great concepts and people I've worked with. And I said, we're going to put in our core values. And that's what we're going to start with, day one. So day one, when I took over this company during the middle of the pandemic, I'm explaining to everyone, these are the things that we're going to go after. And it took me weekly meetings with everyone, management and corporate, to talk about these core values over time. Eventually, I'm now once a month that I have meetings, because I do a lot of one-on-one meetings when I go out to the park to explain our core values. But my team is really on board with our core values now. And I know it's kind of, I won't say on autopilot, but the team gets it. But things we're looking for is honesty, integrity, and transparency. You're going to know the good and the bad about our business. I think you need to be innovative. We need to take innovative risk taking. Safety is number one, of course, in our business. And we need to make sure we're a very safe park, very clean park. I put my entire team initially through Disney's Institute of Guest Service, the Disney Institute. And that was my park managers as well as corporate, to explain the differences of Disney and why we want to be Disney-like as we move forward. We'll never be like Disney, but we can emulate lots of great aspects of Disney. But we're basically a Disney at a fraction of the cost,
Yeah.
And what determines that for me, what I see back in service, is I look at where our reviews were when we took over the park. There were low 2s and low 3s, and now we've only got a couple in the high 3s, and the rest are in high 4s. So our reviews have come back much, much stronger. That tells me our service is getting to our guests now. A lot more 4s and 5s that we see guests, posting on our behalf. But looking at it, you say, well, what else are we? We're in the community, so we should have some sort of social responsibility. We should have some strategic partnerships. We should have some things that emulate what we're about. Most people come to our parks to escape. So let's create that great entertainment value for them. Let's hold team members accountable. So all these different core values, what I originally believed in, we've reset our core values this year to bring all the team members together and all their input versus what Tim said initially. And now we have a great cohesive team following good core values. That's fundamental for all decisions and everything we do going forward.
I love that. Company culture really does flow from the corner office, doesn't it?
It does. And everyone will say, well, everyone's part of it. Yes, but it really has to start somewhere. Yeah. And you have to walk the walk. You got to walk your talk, because I've seen a lot of other companies say this is our core values, but they don't follow it. I try to make sure I do the same thing and walk my walk.
Do you still use Disney Institute with new hires? Have you been able to develop your own kind of cultural training?
We've actually changed it a little bit. So we've created a couple different things. We've created updated videos for our orientation, a little discussion on core values, a message from me, talk about our parks. Not everyone, when I first got on board, nobody talked to every other park. Now we got more park managers, supervisors talking to each other's parks, getting best habits, best practices.
Yeah.
And but we've also created supervisor training. We started with park manager training, and we would go through core values. We would go through our beliefs. We would go into what is safety. We put them through different training programs with our senior team. Our senior team would teach this to them. So they might talk about marketing, they might talk about IT, they might talk about safety and operations. They'll go through different aspects of market, or how does accounting work? And a lot of people in this industry, and frankly in the restaurant industry too, don't understand accounting or what you need to do, but we teach them those things to really understand their P&L so they can be responsible for their facility. I'm giving someone keys to anywhere from a $2.5–3 million operation to over a $10 million operation. They should know their park. And if they don't, I probably have the wrong person on the bus. And we've had to make some changes, of course, over time. But now people understand their P&L. The food and beverage managers understand food cost, the labor associated with it, how to make sure that they count inventories correctly. It's just all those fundamental things, but we've had to teach them these things, and we've done this during different process. We did a little bit with the supervisor training because I need to know everything a manager does, but then the managers, we get much more deeper, and we bring them together. We've gone to Irvine, we've gone to New Jersey this past year, we'll go to another location next year, and they get to see other parks and how other parks interact, and they make new peers to talk to if there's problems and issues and challenges.
I love that. It sounds like you've really instituted a policy of personal ownership too. Isn't that so important for employees to really get on board? Yeah.
Yeah, because when I first got there, the one thing I did notice, especially as a consultant, they're here just to collect a check.
Yeah.
And we got to get out of that mentality. I'm going to compensate you. So we put in the previous regime that went bankrupt, promised lots of things for bonuses. We stuck to what our plan was. We might tweak it annually a little bit on different goals and objectives and so forth. But the other company was known for, here, hit this goal. Oh, and by the way, when it comes time to pay you a bonus, we're going to take it away. Mm-hmm. So we had to build trust with a lot of these folks. And a lot of them didn't believe the numbers we were going to do. And we were in a low per caps of about $20. Today we're running $50 to $55, $56 per cap.
Nice.
And in our FECs and over in the 70s for our water parks. Again, they didn't believe this would change. I had to get the philosophy ingrained initially. I said, we're going to make money on every guest. We don't make more money by getting more guests here and losing $1 on every guest or more. So we're going to make money on every guest, and I'm going to show you how this works. And when they start seeing the numbers, they go, I didn't think this would happen, but I believe now. Great. Now follow me on the other stuff that we're working on.
I love it. And have you seen employee retention rates improve?
Yeah, I mean, we were always pretty good, but I will have to say initially, it was challenging that first year because of pandemic. We were open and closed all parks 4 times. And I had to lay off 85% of the workforce a week after Thanksgiving 2020 and didn't reopen really until March 21. Just because I got so many in California and challenges associated with each municipality. But with it, I would say initially I was stuck with whoever was left that didn't want to leave, from the previous bankrupt company. So I would say my talent wasn't the best, but boy, the talent that's there or those that did stay stepped up and really understood what we were doing. So we've attracted a few more people to us. And yeah, I would say now the turnover is much less than it used to be.
What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire?
Really we can teach, anything in the company, but do they have the charisma? Can they speak up? Are they willing to talk? I don't care if someone tells me, hey, this isn't going to work because of X, Y, and Z, not just because we did it before, but we're seeing this. Give me good feedback. Someone that's willing to stand up. It's funny, that's how I got this job with private equity. My boss from Cerberus Private Equity said, I'm hiring you because the last person couldn't speak up his mind on what's good and what's bad. I'm willing to say good and bad, whether you like it or you don't, you're going to hear the truth. And when people tell me the truth, even my COO's that way, and it's like, sometimes I just don't want to hear it, that we got to spend more capital expenditures on X, Y, and Z, whatever that might be. And I'm like, can we stop spending the capital, please? But it has to be done, and I need to hear it. We have old parks. I mean, Boomer's brand has been around for over 30, 35 years. And so we've got some very old parks in some of these places that need constant tender loving care, ACs, whatever might break down. We need to do more on go-karts, engines, whatever that might be. We fixed all the parks when we first took them over and spent over $14 million since we took over, but there's always that maintenance. And I want to hear from my team truly what's needed. So when it's someone new coming into the company, I want to hear the truth. Yeah. I'm going to give you my truth. And my team knows that too, because now my monthlies, I bring in all supervisors, managers, corporate onto a call that I go over our results for the previous 30 days. What's happened? This is what's going on, good and bad. Hey, these are the things we need to focus on a little bit more. They're going to hear the honest truth from me. And that's the way it's been since I started. Does everyone agree to that type of philosophy? Some people like to hide. I don't like those individuals that's part of those that want to hide. I want someone that actually wants to work, and I'm going to compensate them for it. And we've done really good in the fact that we've compensated the managers really well. But about a year and a half ago, we decided to put in another reward system called Nectar, that I want to reward everybody for good behaviors. And so we give them points that they can redeem for gift cards and trips and merchandise and whatever it might be, because we want them to emulate more good behavior, like to go on above and beyond to help somebody. And we want to reward them, and we want to get the managers and supervisors to be able to hand out those points that are on the front line, as well as those from corporate, not just making a decision that's from corporate that you get X bonus or this is what you're going to do for these things. We want to make sure that everyone's well taken care of. One of the things I ask when I go out to the parks and meet one-on-one with team members, I meet with all team members, hourly, salary, whoever it might be, and I ask them 3 questions. What do you like about this company? What don't you like about this company? And what would you change if you could with this company? And it's amazing the things that people talk about. Some are good, some are just saying what they think you want to hear, but others are very honest. And I love that because it creates new opportunities for us.
Yeah. And no surprises, right? I think that's an important culture to create.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. We don't, as I tell my team, so many things, so many times, look, make me aware. It's your area, whether it's operations, marketing, IT, finance, it's your area. Run it. I trust you. That's what you're here for. Right. But make me aware. Make me aware of what's going on. And they do. My team definitely does. Hey, this is coming up, or hey, this might help us or may hurt us, whatever it might be. And I take that into consideration. If it's a good, valid information, of course I'm going with it. There's only a few times that I've overturned what my team has said, but that was more early on when I took over, because it's like this team is not completely there yet. So I'm going to hold fast with what we're going to change.
I love it. Tim, we're just about out of time, but we've got a couple of last questions. I'm really curious, what do you do to keep your saw sharpened? What, in terms of executive development? You read business books, you listen to podcasts, are there mentors that you go to? Tell us a little bit about how you keep sharp.
I guess there's two things. So I think you got to exercise. I run a lot of marathons, half marathons now mainly. I used to do a lot of fulls. I've done 33 fulls and halves since turning 40. I'm 58 now. So I'm doing something. I'm always out and exercising. Might be walking now, might be biking. A little less running, especially in the heat here in Florida. There's not any time in the day that you can really go out and enjoy it until it starts cooling off. But with it, when I'm walking, I'm always listening to a book, and most of the books I love is autobiographies. And it's all kinds. That could be from Sam Walton, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. Right now, I'm listening to the rise and fall of WeWork offices. Amazing what Adam Newman did to that company. Yeah. But you get different perspectives from it. That's why I really love the autobiographies. I do listen to other business books and self-helps and so forth. But that's where I get a lot of inspiration to think about the business. What could we do differently? Always thinking like an entrepreneur. What could we do a little bit? Change some things. But when it comes down to where do I get my information? Yeah, I'm looking at, I have certain restaurant, franchising, entertainment publications that I'm watching on a daily basis that are posting. IAP is one of the bigger ones for our industry, which is right here in Orlando. So it's great that they're close by. I try to attend as many of those events as well as the expos, see what's new, see what's out there. And I always think of it from the eye of the FEC and what our guests would want, as well as throughput. There's always new stuff coming out, but it doesn't mean it always works. But I do keep in touch with different foods, different trends, what really is moving. Coming from the restaurant industry, it's something I just can't leave. I'm always looking at Applebee's, Denny's, even lots that are in the fast food industry. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Why are they having such a hard time in certain areas? Why are they closing restaurants? And what does that say about what we're doing, which kind of solidifies having good food in my facilities, which we've changed since starting here, keeps people there longer and spend more on food and beverage and liquor, beer and wine. So keeping in touch with what's going on in the restaurants has really helped me. And I do have different mentors, and I talk to people all the time, especially within my industry of entertainment, for sure.
Yeah, great. Tim, last question. We ask this of all our CEO guests. What career and life advice would you give to someone who's listening today that maybe has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
I think the biggest thing that if I look back over my career, and I was blessed with parents that put me into that entrepreneurial environment, but always step up. Most people don't want to step up. Nobody wants to go the extra mile, let alone the second mile. So, really step up and say, hey, what else could I do here? Is there something else I can add benefit to this business that others are not doing? Is there something that I can gain from it? And it's not just that you're going to get immediate gain and say a promotion or whatever, but it's more that you learn, makes you a more well-rounded individual to help you to get to that C spot area. If you make it to CFO or COO, well, what do I need to do to get to the CEO role? How do I start speaking more at events in my industry? I've spoken at IAPA, I've spoken at the National Restaurant Association, I've spoken in lots of areas. And I try to put myself out there that might make me uncomfortable. Be willing to be uncomfortable as much as possible and go learn something new in a different area. You may not know the answer, but frankly, with the ChatGPT and other things, you can find out a lot of answers pretty quick. And so get out there and look at things, but volunteer. And people go, well, I'm just going to wait until they recognize me. Well, then you're not going to get recognized. Those that put their neck out, they're willing to try, learn, maybe fail, but you might be failing in a safe environment for that one day when you get the opportunity to actually get into that spot, that you now have the resources and the skills and experiences to make a difference.
Sage counsel. My guest today is Tim Murphy. He's CEO of Boomers Park. Boomers is a privately held company based in Boca Raton, Florida. The company owns and operates 6 Boomers Parks in California and Florida, Big Kahuna's Water and Adventure Park in Florida, and Big Kahuna's Water Park in New Jersey. Tim Murphy, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you, Brant. Appreciate being here.
Hey, listeners, if you enjoyed the podcast today, we'd love to hear your questions. We're introducing a new opportunity for our listeners to send us a voice memo at info@go4roi.com. That's info@go4roi.com. Send us a voicemail, keep it a minute or less, and let us know what you'd like to ask our CEOs. We'll promise to broadcast it on the air as soon as we receive it. Can't tell you which CEO will do it, but we'd love to have your input, and we'll let you know when your question's being asked. Thanks so much, and thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.